if you want to see the nicest toilet at Ur.
I'm Brad Hafford, archaeologist at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm still editing videos from our field season in southern Iraq at the ancient city of Ur. My goal in these videos is to give an overview of what we learned and to highlight some of our finds. I've shown 3 of our 4 active trenches so far, and today I'll be showing the 4th, or rather, I'll be following Professor Adelheid Otto as she tells us about it. Square 5 began in 2017 under the SUNY Stony Brook permit for excavations. It sits inside the city wall, but at the far southern end, an area that had never been explored before. Sir Leonard Woolley did investigate the city wall itself, tracing the lines and stopping to excavate small temples near the southern extent, but a large area of the interior in the south of the city remains untouched. By opening a trench here, we hoped to find houses to compare to those in the more central portion of the city that Woolley had already excavated in areas AH and EM, and some of which we had re-investigated. Based on the neighborhoods he had excavated, Woolley believed that Ur, especially in the Old Babylonian period, around 2000 to around 1740 BCE here at Ur, was densely populated with only the sacred zone having some relatively open space. The domestic areas he explored were certainly packed, but what about areas that were less central, out near the city wall? In 2019, Professor Jörg Fassbinder and his team conducted a magnetometry survey of much of the southern portion of the mound. This revealed walls and what appeared to be more open spaces in some of this southern area of the city. The only ancient city map known from the general time period was found at Nippur, and it dates in the Kassite period just after the Old Babylonian. So yes, it's a few hundred years later, but it's the only one we've got to compare. And its southern end has labeled area that's open and says gardens in the city. Perhaps this was a common feature of ancient cities in general. The house in Area 5 was found to lie directly atop mud brick walls of an earlier period. Just as in Square 4, we wanted to find Ur 3 houses, and so we've investigated some of these walls as they extend to the south from that Old Babylonian house and underneath it. But let's start with the Old Babylonian house itself as we follow archaeologist Professor Adelheid Otto from Ludwig Maximilian University as she talks with our cuneiform specialist Professor Dominique Charpin from Collège de France.
This is the main entrance here to the house of Sinada. And you see the staircase leading down with a very, very large door socket over here. A huge door socket here.
Okay.
And in fact, the staircase is the staircase of the second phase, because this house of Sinada had 3 phases. This is the original floor when the house was built. Then about half a meter up, corresponding to the level of the door socket, there is the second phase, which we date into the to the Old Babylonian period. This is the original floor of Sinada, but it was empty, nearly empty, very few objects on it, some pottery. And then they brought earth from another place and filled it up, because we have sometimes 2 or 3 tablets also in this fill. So it's a mixture. And then after 50 centimeters or up to 1 meter, over there it's 1 meter higher, the second floor level. So this is the entrance room. From the entrance room you come to this room 14. So then you enter the big courtyard, and from the courtyard you go to this room 12. We can go inside in a short while. Here was one big oven, and here a second one. And so this is the kitchen, room 13. There is the staircase.
And the wall is not preserved in that...
No, because the Kassites robbed completely this wall. And from the courtyard next to it, there's the staircase leading up. So this is the staircase going up to what I think the second floor. And under the staircase, in this alcove, there was lying the letter from Sinada to Nutuptum, who wrote her, "Don't be afraid, I'm well."
We know about this lady, whose name was Nutuptum, and her husband, Sinada, because of the many cuneiform tablets they left behind, as well as from clay ceilings with their names. They were the first owners and probably the ones who built the house around 1850 BCE. Sinada traveled a lot, but he often wrote letters back home to his wife, giving us a glimpse into their daily life and even their emotions. In the letter that Adelheid just mentioned, found this season in the kitchen, Sinada asks Nutuptum why she is angry in her heart. It appears that Nutuptum was concerned that her husband was paying too much attention to his work for the temple and neglecting his family. Similar situations are common today, and it makes these people particularly real to me, an emotional connection across the millennia.
So it really seems that Nutuptum was involved in lots of work with water and liquids. So since she apparently bred the sheep for the Ningal temple, perhaps she butchered or cut the sheep here, and then we think she took the bones and all the food stuff and put it in this room here. Because it's lots of burnt material on the floor, you see it here. It is quite ashy, and the room has a niche. So you see in this niche there are still some remains of larger bones and bowls and so lying. So I imagine that she had her little place for drying the meat and I don't know what here in this room.
So this is a typical courtyard house in design, but unusual in size. It is the second largest Old Babylonian house uncovered at Ur, bested only slightly by number 11 Paternoster Row that Woolley initially called the Khan, since he thought it might have been a more commercial building where traveling merchants would come with their pack animals to do business. When he found a domestic chapel in this building, he changed his interpretation, thinking that would only be in a private home. But its remains are unusual for the overall size, and it could have had both domestic and commercial functions. The house in Area 5 may also have had multiple uses. Especially in the later phases, the northeastern portion seems to have been divided off as potentially small shops.
In the second phase, transformed to a room with a very large bread oven. And since the house was completely remodeled, rebuilt in the second phase, we think that this was the border of the living tract of the house, and this were just shops along the road. Perhaps this bread oven was for producing bread for the people to be sold, because this is just a room with virtually nothing, just an easy access from the street. So perhaps people were waiting here in this room for buying their bread. So at the time von Sinada, everything belonged to the house, and in the second phase, here was the living area and this was the shop area, we think.
So the people had not so much means, and they decided to rent a part of the surface to.
It seems so. Yeah.
It's a pure speculation, but.
And therefore they had also no need for the toilet, because the toilet was completely closed down and not used anymore. And it's a beautiful toilet.
I'm not sure if I would call it particularly nice, but in comparison to other toilets found at Ur, she might be right. What would be the criteria for the nicest ancient toilet, I wonder? This one is better made than most. It has a well-made cover and it's very deep, some 8 meters down. Plus, it's in a room that is a bit more spacious than other toilets and has this rather stylish curved wall at the back. Many of the toilets Woolley reported were cramped spaces beneath the stairs, but even so, only about 6% of the houses in Area AH had a reported toilet space. Drains could be very deep and were surrounded by broken pottery to allow fluids to disperse more easily into the surrounding soil. These cramped rooms with simple drains would not have been pleasant at all, and we know about fears of such spaces from texts that tell us they could be inhabited by the demon Shuloch, probably representing disease.
And this goes 8 meters down.
We have less information about the later owners because they just didn't leave behind as many texts. Maybe they cleared them out before they moved or didn't write as many. We just aren't sure. But more on that later. For now, I'll wrap up and say thanks for watching. Please join me again on the next Artifactually Speaking. I'm Brad Hafford. See you there.